find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
What the heck are you wearing? Is that half a leather jacket?
Listen, do you know how hard it is to make Apartheid funny?
Who's wordy now? Who's wordy now? Who's out there ready to be getting down? Just me and you. Are you wordy too? Who's getting down with you? Listen, my friend, right to the end. We'll talk it all through somehow. You've heard the song, now come along. We're getting down and wordy now.
Hey, fellow truth seekers, I'm Justin.
And I'm Brandy, and together we'll be your guides on this spine-tingling journey through the unknown.
We dive headfirst into the eerie realms of cryptids, from Bigfoot to Loch Ness Monster.
And hold on tight, because we'll explore spine-chilling encounters with extraterrestrial beings and UFO sightings that will leave you questioning what's really out there.
Beyond the Shadows is not your average paranormal podcast. Our goal is simple, to shed light on the shadows that haunt our world and confront the unexplained with an open mind.
And for the skeptics, don't worry, we have something for you too. Our conspiracy theories will challenge your beliefs and make you question everything. So, if you're fascinated by the paranormal, yearn for chilling true crime stories, or crave the adrenaline rush of uncovering conspiracies,
join us on this hair-raising adventure as we journey beyond the shadows.
Welcome to Getting Down and Wordy.
I'm Russell Perkle.
And I'm Hannah, and I'm also on the podcast.
And on this podcast, we talk about popular music and topical language.
Super topical. We're talking about some heavy etymology, like heavy-hitting etymology today. And it all begins with Dave Matthews.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Trigger warning, we're talking about Dave Matthews. It's the only triggering thing in this episode.
Today we're going to be discussing the topic of apartheid and the etymology of the word and what sort of words are related to it. This is very topical these days, not because of apartheid South Africa, that's over, but Israel's been doing some of its own apartheiding over the last, how long ago was 67? More than, it's almost like 60 years by now.
Almost 60 years, yeah. So, happy Hanukkah! Or should I say
right.
Hanukkah?
Ah, shucks. It doesn't just belong to me, but I would love to talk to you about some Hanukkah.
Okay.
Which, by the way, Hanukkah this year begins on Christmas Day, which happens every now and then. We've talked a little bit about how the Hebrew calendar is really messed up, and, well, not necessarily, like, messed up, because it makes sense to them, but it certainly doesn't make sense to most people in the West.
It's lunar, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is it gonna stretch into next year?
Oh, yeah, it's 8 days no matter what.
That's so weird.
Yeah, these festival calendars really don't give a crap about, like, what it's like in the Gregorian calendar, because, who's the hell is Gregory?
True, yeah. Gregory's all news. So it's funny, though. That means, like, 2025 will technically be the year of 2 Hanukkahs, when you think about it, you know?
Oh, well, it won't be the first year with 2 Hanukkahs. This has happened at least 2 times that I can remember since I was a kid. Probably more. I'm not great at remembering patterns of the lunar calendar, because I was raised in the Gregorian, dang it.
Yeah, and then there's the leap year, which probably throws it off, but also this is pretty boring. So.
Leap years are so impenetrably hard to understand in Hebrew. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it also has a lot in common with the Muslim calendar, too. Sometimes Ramadan takes place in the winter, sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the spring or the fall. It is all over the calendar, this Ramadan. And Hebrew calendars are very similar in that sometimes we have an entire leap month. No idea why.
That's awesome.
But sometimes I don't even know like how to determine whether it's like a legal leap month or a legal. I
love the like Dharma from Dharma and Greg levels of spontaneity and like just quirkiness of this. It's this idea that like, okay, this year we're doing a leap month. You're welcome.
It's practically whimsical, actually. I'm really like okay with the whimsy. I just don't depend on me regarding this calendar because I don't have a clue.
Bound to be a very whimsical episode today, I'm sure.
Oh, so much whimsy I have for you. So, Dave Matthews, he has this song called The Last Stop that came out in 1998. Russell, what did you think of this song?
It's a hard song to enjoy. It's funny how he does a different voice for it, which I think is really fascinating. And I listened to a few different live versions because I thought like, okay, well maybe it sounds different. It sounds about the same every version. For me, as someone who often likes kind of a little bit discordant, a little bit like this tension between, roughness in music and the grace and beauty of just music itself, I really should like it more than I do. I find there's a part of the song where it kind of hits its stride and it starts to sound good, but it's like 2.5 minutes into a 3-minute song. So I find the weird like faux Middle Eastern bits just not that enjoyable. Not from like an offensiveness. I'm not saying that. I don't care about the appropriation thing. I just don't find them that enjoyable in the song. Maybe it's because it's like not really their wheelhouse, I guess. So yeah, I don't know.
That makes
not really
sense,
doing much for me, but I don't dislike it as much as I would have thought I did. Okay. How about you?
For myself, I was a little bit intimidated because you taught me that the song Crash was kind of like
Crash into me.
Mysteriously about masturbation, yeah.
Yeah.
And which was intimidating because that's not really my type of anything.
Did you?
As far as I can
Hannah,
tell.
did you even try to like tie masturbation to Hanukkah? I feel like you didn't even try. Come on, there's got to be something the two have in common.
In part 3, don't you worry a thing.
Okay, I'm glad that warms my heart.
For my part, I wasn't in love with the Arab and Jewish music motif in the beginning for a lot of reasons. I just find white people performing Arab and Jewish music, it's sort of cartoonish. Like it relies on the stereotypical music. It's not its own kind of like original.
Yeah. An American guy from South Africa, for sure, it's a little weird. But, it's like, I think we have to be careful with that kind of language, too, because it's like there are white Jewish people, Arab people who identify as white, so, it's a little complicated, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It is complicated, and so that's not my main criticism. My main criticism is I can't hardly understand him. I don't know what he's got in his mouth that makes Dave Matthews just impossible to understand at a first pass. And there are no YouTube videos that have the lyrics over the music, so I can't even follow along.
I find them relatively not that bad. But it's also kind of fascinating how much rock and roll as a genre loves incomprehensible music. It's like Bob Dylan, like probably the most successful rock, with the most accolades, I suppose, musician of all time, and he's like just famously incomprehensible. And then there's the Weird Al's parody of the Nirvana song was all about how you can't understand what Kurt Cobain was saying in that song, which is kind of true. Like I feel like I understand more of Dave Matthews than I do of Kurt Cobain in Smells Like Teen Spirit, you know.
Yeah, that's also a pretty difficult one to understand. I wonder why people find that enjoyable, because I certainly don't.
For me, it's fine. I mean, honestly, I find most music's kind of hard to understand. There's a lot going on at once. You know, it's like you're listening in like a crowded restaurant or a bar or something. You know, it's like there's a lot of instruments in the background. I think it's turn those instruments off. It'd be a lot easier to understand what the singer is saying, you know. So, I mean, I've just always been pretty much like, okay, if you want to know what everybody's saying, you just got to check the lyrics, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I like the instrumentality of the voice, and I think David Matthews is really going for that. You know, I think he's got that. Really, he's more trying to, you know, trumpet with his voice more than he is trying to like articulate with his voice. You know.
Are you ready to concede that is not unusual to dislike music? Because everything you just described about what music inherently is feels uncomfortable.
Well, it is unusual to dislike music, but is it not unreasonable? Yeah, maybe not. But
Thank you.
I don't know.
That's all I wanted was a little validation.
And that's all you'll get. All right. I don't know. So, I mean, like, I think this is a time when our, like, slight age difference really shows. Because I think I probably grew up more in the era of Dave Matthews is, you know, unquestionably the king of, like, this sort of particular alt-rock kind of style. And he is just kind of, like, it was, like, a little bit more elevated than other stuff, you know what I mean? So it's, like, kind of, like, not quite the working man's music like Alice in Chains or some such thing like that. But it was like music that everybody generally had positive feelings about. But I get the sense from you that you're like not as, this doesn't feel quite as familiar and like nostalgic to you.
Yeah. I actually remember the first time I encountered anybody who liked Dave Matthews, and I remember them being mocked relentlessly. I think by the time I was in high school, liking Dave Matthews became sort of like an ironic thing.
Almost like the Nickelback of their day, if Nickelback was also mega talented, you know. I think Dave Matthews is also the band that, like, if you're in a bar and you make the mistake of, like, chatting about music with a white guy of a certain age, they're going to talk about Dave Matthews with you for an hour. This definitely happened to me on at least 2 occasions.
Oh, man. That sounds I'm sure it's happened to me a couple of times, but I just tend to zone out. So.
I just get blackout drunk.
I completely dissociate whenever I'm talking to a stranger about music. Again, I work in a hotel, and there's a lot of really drunk people talking about music at me, and I just zone out and think about Bluey.
Yeah, I mean, music conversation generally is kind of nearly impossible. You know, it's like, what do you say about music, really? You know, all you could say is like, have you heard and do you enjoy this? And either they can say yes or no. And, you know, most of it's kind of, there's no words, you know, to talk about it.
Which is why we have a podcast about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we used to talk about music less. It was a smaller part of it. But if anything, you kind of expanded that part, which is the weird fact about it.
I don't know. I think it's because I need to understand why people like it, because they think I'm strange for not liking it. So if I figure out why they like music and just pick out the... Yeah.
What have you figured out?
I have figured out that there are whole people, whose body just involuntarily moves during certain songs. Mm-hmm. And that is wild to me. Like, there are people that literally can't stop themselves from dancing. Mm-hmm. And I have learned to look for the poetry in the lyrics instead of, like, relying on the music to be pleasant, which is one of the reasons that I find Dave Matthews so frustrating, because I don't understand anything he's saying. It's hard to appreciate the poetry when it's just the only words that you can make out are killing or war. Like, it's very, very strange to me.
You know, what do you think people like about Dave Matthews Band?
Through this song, I can't find much. Through the other songs, I get the impression that the main drive is the innuendo.
No, I don't. That's it. It's not really an innuendo-heavy band.
No, this one isn't extremely innuendo-heavy. I think that's why it's also not as popular as, like, Crash.
One song that has some kind of innuendo.
Song.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think so.
I did not subject to myself to
You've definitely heard
Matthews.
other Dave Matthews Band. I promise you've heard
I've
other
heard Crash.
Dave Matthews Band songs besides Crash Into Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at his discography and nope.
You've heard them. You just don't know them by name.
Probably. Help me out with this. I've got his discography in front of me.
I don't know. He's got that song about I don't know by name, but he's got that song like about don't bite the mailman, which you have definitely heard before in your life. There's a couple others.
That was a very weird sentence to say I've definitely heard before.
I promise. Play it on Spotify. We'll cut
it. You want me to play it?
Yeah, go ahead. Let me see. Let me find. I'll figure out what it's called.
Wow. I'm really surprised that you were so sure that I've heard this before. I have not heard this before.
Wow. Amazing. Surprising. Wow. So Hannah has never heard What Would You Say? So probably Crash Into Me is probably your level of familiarity, because I don't think there's anything... the Space Between you've probably heard.
Oh, actually, I know the Space Between.
That gets put in in movies a lot and stuff. Yeah.
Got it. I have heard that before. I don't like it. I don't know if I needed to specify that. So I guess I am like twice as familiar with Dave Matthews songs now. So that's an improvement in real time.
Yeah, improving where it counts, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over just a little bit of information about Mr. Dave Matthews, Dave the Matthews. He was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, on January 9th, 1967. He's a Capricorn. He was born a Quaker. As a result, his family raised him on really pacifist ideals, which sort of factors into his life a little bit later. When he was 2 years old, his family moved to Yorktown Heights, New York. By 1974, when he was, from 67 to 74. I'm so bad at math, sir. But I think he was about 10 years old.
So like 74, so he would have been 7 years old, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, 7 years old. They moved to Cambridge in the UK. And then they moved back to Johannesburg in 1977 after Dave Matthews' dad died of lung cancer. And
I don't think a lot of people move back to South Africa once they leave South Africa. Not a popular place to choose to live, generally speaking.
Truly, and especially not in the late 70s, early 80s. It was not a real chill place to be. For reference, South Africa put into legal practice the practice of apartheid in, I believe it was 1947, although they had been practicing it since 1948. And that policy did not end until 1994. So just think about that kind of environment where you only see white people in Africa. And worse, if you were black in Africa, where a lot of black people happen to come from, it's got to be really strange and awful and horrible to be put in a second-class citizen status until, God, 94. And racism still persists over there, but it's just not full-throatedly enforced by the government anymore, which is, I suppose, an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, in many ways, it's American segregation, but by another name. I don't know, is it more extreme? Like, honestly, I know pretty little about apartheid, generally.
Oh, great. Well, we'll get into it in the next section. Don't you worry, sir. So he moves back to Johannesburg in 77. That's also the year that he became a naturalized U.S. citizen because he had spent so much of his childhood in the U.S. In 85, he graduated from the South African equivalent of high school, and this put him at a pretty dangerous position that a lot of men in their countries over the years have had to face. There was a chance that he could be conscripted into the South African army, and as a Quaker and a pacifist, this is obviously not going to happen for him. So he escaped. South Africa escaped. It's not like anybody tried to stop him. He escaped. Yeah, he emigrated to the U.S. permanently in 86.
So he had so he basically had like his 10-year-old up to adulthood years in South Africa, plus that like 0 to 2 in South Africa, I think. Yeah, interesting. I'm also kind of, I don't know who South Africa has an army to fight. Is it just like a kind of police state type thing where they're using the army for control inside, or?
Yes, during apartheid, conscription could mean into the police forces or the army.
Wow.
So, not great. Kind of a really violent situation for men to be in.
I really feel like Quakers are like this like quiet force underlying so much of, I don't know, culture, world culture change. Like, I'm surprised even here there are Quakers in South Africa. I had no idea.
Yeah, you almost kind of expect Quakers to just eat oatmeal and like, that's the only stereotype I have of Quakers. I know that they're mostly pacifist, and I know that they make oatmeal. No arguments, those are only facts. So in 1994, his sister Anne, who was still in South Africa, was murdered by her husband, leaving her 2 kids behind. And Dave Matthews says he's still grieving. Like, it happened in 94, and it's a big process. And when somebody's murdered, that makes it even more difficult, I'm sure. But she left behind 2 kids. So after Anne's murder, Dave and his sister Jane brought the kids back over to the U.S., and they raised them as their own, which is ideal situation if you're going to get murdered, is having your siblings take care of your kids, honestly.
What an interesting family dynamic. So as far as you know, that it was brother and sister living together and raising 2 children together.
I don't know if they were living together or if they had like split custody, but the raising of the kids was left up to the siblings.
Yeah.
And
good on him. I mean, that's a hard thing. Like, what? So what year was that again?
That was in 1994.
1994. He was born in 67, you said?
Yep.
3 to 70. So he's like 27. He's still a very young man to just like suddenly say, okay, I'm going to just voluntarily choose to take on parenthood, you know, of 2 children. That's incredible.
Absolutely. And Jane was even younger. And they have done a fantastic job of keeping the kids out of the spotlight. No details are known about those 2 kids whatsoever, which is, I mean, I think it's good. I think that kids should be protected from being popular, like famous for horrible things. But, you know, I commend him for that 100%.
Well, also, Dave Matthews is not that famous. He's not like...
True, okay.
He's not Taylor Swift. I mean, come on.
Yeah, okay. And Dave Matthews is such a basic name that if I saw Dave Matthews on the check-in list, I wouldn't even think about the artist. I would just be like, oh, some white guy. Cool.
There's bound to be other Dave Matthews in the world. I'll grant you that.
Oh, 100%, absolutely. So go Dave Matthews on keeping yourself unfamous and also your sister's kids.
That's why, yeah. He tried to control his own level of fame just for the sake of his sister's children, yeah.
Well, it is kind of interesting because he didn't actually start, like, releasing music. He wasn't known for his music until 1991. So he was very, very freshly, like, out on, like, doing concerts. It was just about 3 years into his career.
This is the most math I've ever had to do in my head in one of these episodes. So I think he's 24 now. He's aged back 3 years, okay? and so he starts to be famous at 24. Good for him.
I've got some more math for you then.
Uh-oh.
He did a couple of movies. Did you know this about him?
No, I don't think so. I honestly, I really remember him very vividly guest starring on an episode of House, the medical show. He had like echolalia. He had like I guess today we'd probably say autism spectrum. We'd assume, but some kind of intellectual disorder and had this like piano playing ability. But anyways, I won't tell you the full synopsis of that episode.
So
what movies was he in?
Full synopsis. In 2003, he was in Where the Red Fern Grows. Where the Red Fern Grows.
Didn't see it.
2005, Because of Winn-Dixie.
Didn't see it.
2007, I did see this one. I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry.
Didn't see it.
That one's got Adam Sandler and Kevin James.
I remember it coming out.
Yeah.
They were firefighters, yeah.
In 2008, in 2008, he came out with, this is kind of surprising. It's called You Don't Mess with the Zohan with Adam Sandler.
I remember that coming out. Also did not see that.
And in 2011, Just Go With It came out. He had a minor role in that one. That was with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston, I believe.
That was one of those like straight to Netflix movies they made together.
Well, it was in 2011. Netflix wasn't at that streaming level just yet.
No, I don't remember.
But I do find it interesting that he had a role in You Don't Mess with the Zohan, because he's been pretty ardently anti-Zionist, and the movie You Don't Mess with the Zohan is about an IDF soldier who escapes to America to avoid getting murdered by or assassinated by a Palestinian terrorist. With super. I'm sure it hasn't aged great.
I don't know. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, it kind of seems like at least this protagonist was anti being a soldier, at least.
He was the most famous soldier in Israel. He just didn't want to get assassinated. He just wanted to be a hairdresser in New York City. I remember that. Okay?
Yeah, I remember that aspect of it. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I withhold judgment because I haven't seen the movie. But yeah, hard to tell from that. Even I think, is it pro-Zionism or anti-Zionism? I don't know. But yeah, it seems like Dave Matthews in it, so you would presume, not too Zionist.
Yeah. I think Adam Sandler's become a little bit more radical Zionist since this came out, because this one had the You Don't Mess with the Zohan had the overarching theme of Jews and Palestinians aren't so different. We should get married to each other and have a good time. So I think that both of them have shifted, one to the left and one to the right.
I mean, that seems quite progressive, so it seems good. It seems like a good, positive movie story. I don't know. Again, I'd have to see, but it seems okay. It seems okay to me. Just having zero knowledge, it seems okay.
I haven't I haven't seen it since college, so I'm not sure how well it holds up. But there it is.
He's an interesting person to like stunt cast into movies, because it's like he doesn't look like a movie star. Not to be mean to Dave Matthews, maybe it's the normalness of him. Maybe that's what they're going for. Yeah, I could definitely recognize him.
Dave Matthews walked like right up to me, and like no sunglasses or anything, I would not recognize him. I swear to you. He's just
he kind of looks like a Simpsons, not one of the Simpsons, but one of the other townsfolk, but in real life. Honestly, that's how I would describe Dave Matthews. You could paint him yellow. Yeah, you could paint him yellow, and he would just be one of the Simpsons Springfield townfolk, I think. If that helps.
So a little bit more specifically about The Last Stop. The Last Stop allegedly refers to Jerusalem, seeing as both Jews and Muslims have this sort of tradition. Also, Christians have this sort of tradition that on a pilgrimage, the ultimate destination, the last stop, if you will, is in Jerusalem. So The Last Stop has a lot of really aggressive language, such as war, the only way to peace, I don't fall for that. Or mother cries, is hate so deep, must my baby's bones this hungry fire feed? Which sucks. And a bit of referring to that different voice that you heard. This song has a strange artistic choice that I don't necessarily understand, but one of the lines, one of the sides of the different voices is supposed to be a Muslim and the other one is supposed to be a Jew. So an example of the conversation through the song is the Muslim says, war, the only way to peace? Go away and believe that we are the chosen ones. To which the Jew says, oh no, gracious heathen God, blooded on the cross, your sins are washed enough. Clear reference to Jesus. Muslim guy says, right is wrong now, shut up the big lie, which is something that resonates with Americans a little bit with this election upcoming. It'll be over by the time you hear it. Hopefully, it ended well. And then the Jew says to the U.S.
Either way, it's not. Never mind.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. I agree with you, but one of them is my vote.
And the listeners can guess whom.
And the Jew says to the U.S. and not to the Muslim, we hope to break it down so it's not so black and white. You're right, so righteous, so righteous, so righteous. And that's intended to be like, or interpreted rather to be like Jews running to the Christians in the U.S. to ask for their help in eliminating the violent Muslims, which, I mean, well, that's The Last Stop.
I think that the song, having heard the explanations of the lyrics, I think was more confusing than when I thought I understood them. But I get the general idea here, which is just like both the Israelis and the Palestinians in this song feel that they're right and the other one's wrong, and yet that I mean, I feel as if, I don't know. I mean, in the song, do you feel like one side is being painted as the aggressor, or do you feel like they both seem to be supporting war?
So
in the song, not in real life, like in this song.
My interpretation of it is when the Muslim mother cries about her baby and her baby's bones being fed to the fire, I don't necessarily think that there is another side. If one side supports killing children, then that's the end of it. The other, that side is...
No, my question was like, do they both seem to be like his fictional Muslim and fictional Israeli? Do they both seem to be eager to go to war? Yeah.
No. The Muslim mother seems very
she doesn't like it.
Afraid of going to war.
That's
and
for sure.
The Muslim man at one point said, war, the only way to peace. I don't fall for that.
Okay, that's the Muslim man.
Sends a very clear...
And you can tell by the voice he's using.
Yes.
To me, it sounds the same voice throughout. I don't hear that change at all. I'll have to listen again and see if I can notice some kind of voice change.
Yeah.
Sounds the same.
Dave Matthews, multi-talented. He acts, he sings, and he sings in a different voice.
Allegedly. I listened to this song. I did not hear... Did you feel you heard two voices?
They were both clearly his, but one of them had a different, like, tenor than the other one. It's tricky to... I don't think he's as good a singer as his reputation deserves, to be completely frank.
I don't know. Would you do the song at karaoke?
I would do the song karaoke to make a point, but I would do the song karaoke in, like... I can't match the energy of Dave Matthews ever at any point, so it would probably be, like, an acoustic cover if I ever tried it with, notes that a human woman can sing.
Sure. Would you do two voices?
I don't... Yeah, that's part of the song. You've got to do two voices.
You're
Russell.
required.
Yeah. You're required to do both voices. You're also required to do air guitar in Wayward Son. You're required to do all four voices when you do Bohemian Rhapsody. These are laws encoded in karaoke.
Well, obviously, in Bohemian Rhapsody, you have to do different voices. But this song, I don't know. No one would know if you didn't, honestly. No one's heard this song before, besides us.
How about you? Would you do this song in karaoke?
I was, like, trying to imagine the context in which... I like this idea of a karaoke bar where everyone's doing, like, super political charged songs, you know? I think it depends on the... white dreadlock quotient, you know?
Yes,
like,
yes.
I could see if somehow you're in, like, a world music type of bar, you know? I mean, I could see this song coming out and seeming normal and not out of place, right?
Oh, yeah. I fully... Like, it would not surprise me 1 second, or one single bit, if this song was rediscovered by leftists today and appropriated into the current Gaza conflict. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
It's because it's not that good. No offense to Dave Matthews. He's got good songs, but I don't... I have trouble finding this song good, and I generally like... I'm pretty easy to please, you know?
You are easy to please. I
like most stuff. I like almost everything.
Yeah. You even like discordant music. Why? How?
I like the tension. It's like drama. It's like drama in the music. Yeah.
Got it.
Not just like expressiveness. I think as well. You know, texture. Yeah. Complexity.
So when we come back, we're going to stop talking about music for a second and start talking about words.
Okay, Word. We're coming for you. After this.
Can I Pod with Madness? What we will be doing is looking through vintage Kerrang and Metal Hammer, all from late 80s.
I remember when someone lent me Somewhere in Time, and by that time I'd heard Marillion and I'd heard Def Leppard and I heard Bon Jovi on the radio, and I thought I knew what heavy metal was. And when this started, I thought, I don't know if I can take this. It was so harsh, it was so metal. I thought, I think this is going to be too much for me. But I persevered, I pushed through.
Yeah.
And I think if you tell most Maiden fans would probably think this is quite a soft album because it's got keyboards on it, or synth guitars or something. But yeah, for me, it was a shock to the system.
I credit Alice Cooper with introducing me into type of music, because when I heard that, it was like two friends over. I was like, listen to me, like, obviously this has blown my mind, so it's going to blow your mind too. This is going to be amazing. And played it to them, and then they went, you like heavy metal? And I was like mortified, and I've never forgotten that, because she'd be like, yes, I fucking like heavy metal, kicked over the tape player and walked out of my own room.
Getting down and wordy with Russell and Hannah. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Welcome back to Getting Down and Wordy. Today, we are going to be talking about the subject of apartheid.
Is it okay if I say it without the TH? Is one way right or wrong? Apartheid, is that okay?
I just accidentally pronounced the H because it's in there. And
is it better without? Does it matter?
I'm going to talk to you about exactly where it comes from, actually.
But I mean, it's like the anglicization of words from other languages. When they come into English, we like to think that it's like there are words that we don't anglicize at all, but everything gets anglicized to some degree. It's like croissant. We're not saying croissant, but we're also not saying croissant. So, like, I don't know. I wonder about words like apartheid. Right?
Yeah.
I think Neanderthal is another one where it's like,
oh yeah,
we're pronouncing
Patrick
a
Stewart
th.
pronounces it Neanderthal.
That's what it should be. That's the place in Germany, right? There's no th. Is there a th sound in German? A th? A voiceless th?
Huh. Actually,
Anyways.
I can't really think of any right now. Yeah, that's a good question. So, apartheid is how I suppose a Dutch person would pronounce it. It has been going on in South Africa since about 1947, and it was enshrined in law in 1948. So people were like doing this whole separation thing before they encoded it in law, which is how you have to do these sorts of things.
Yeah, do it for a year, kind of like field test it, do some market research, and then it turns out people really like bigotry. Who knew? And it goes in, make it official.
Absolutely. So apartheid comes from a Dutch and Afrikaans, which Afrikaans is a mix of Dutch and, is it Zulu? Is that the main language? Yeah. So there's a couple of South African dialects. Afrikaans is the most popular one, otherwise English for some reason, because this was originally a Dutch colony, but a lot of English has made its way in. White South Africans generally speak English with something of a British accent, it sounds like. So apartheid comes from two distinct words in Dutch. Apart, which means separate, and hide, which you would probably recognize more as the suffix hood. Because that's the only place that this particular word still survives in English. So, starting with hide, it is a feature of a lot of Germanic languages. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European, as Sakai was the Proto-Indo-European, which means bright and shining. And that, over time, developed into the Proto-Germanic Hydus. Hydus, it meant manner, quality, a bright appearance. You'll see this in words like neighborhood or fatherhood, livelihood or likelihood. These are all intended in its original form to be sort of like a best case scenario, like a bunch of neighbors getting together. Best case scenario, you call it a neighborhood where everybody sort of gets along.
So it's not only the quality of being neighbors or the quality of being fathers, it implied some kind of a positive value add to this thing, right? So some ideal, like a
exactly.
utopia or optimistic kind of sense of it. Fatherhood is like the Platonic ideal of being a father that we're aspiring to or something.
Exactly, and you also get that with adulthood and childhood. Of course, this was an original usage. It has, over the last couple of 100 years, sort of evolved into a more neutral statement. Like, that's just where people live. It's a neighborhood. But
it's a good point that, like, I don't think there are any bad hoods. Like, there's no, like, I don't know, like, drug abuse hood or criminal hood or something,
Well, there is falsehood.
Falsehood, you're right. The optimistic ideal of falseness. Yeah, falsehood. That's fascinating.
But yeah, you're right. There's a very rare instance of a negative hood.
Cool.
And yeah, I think that's great, and I wish that we would bring that back. So the Old English was hood, which evolved from the Old English had. It also was Old Saxon head and German heit or kite and Dutch head. All of these Germanic languages came up with the same sort of usage of that phoneme. So,
meaning something like a concept or quality in that way.
Yeah. All of them have most of them still have a positive quality that's associated with them. Apart, of course, means separate. And that's from the Dutch. We also have a very similar word called apart. In Afrikaans, apartheid roughly translates to separateness or the state of being separate.
Apartness.
Very, very basic.
Sure.
Apart comes from a couple of interesting places. So in the case of apart, the A is equivalent to the Latin of two. And the partem is Latin for apart, piece of, or a faction. So a partem of your body would be like your arm. A partem of your neighborhood would be like your house. So you have apart, meaning two, and the faction. Partem also comes from the Proto-Indo-European per, which meant to grant or to allot. A-L-L-O-T. So that one is a word, a single word. It's not like a lot. So the Latin prefix AD has this standardization. The prefix turns the word into basically an inseparable particle or a prefix. And this, you also see this in words with the prefix of on, in, or words that refer to into. So they have to be standardized, these A's. It's A if the next letter is like a P. You have to change it to an AD, an AT under certain circumstances, AG, but it has to be consistent with the following Latin letter. Sort of like how we say A or an if the next letter is a vowel. Bonus. Okay, so the particles that refer to on, in, or into, those are words like alive, above, asleep, abroad, aside, afoot. It turns nouns into adjectives and adverbs. There is another usage of. This is close to off or from, which is where you get the words like anew, like you're off of the old and you're into the new. Akin, I am of this family. I am akin to it. Abreast, I am of this information. I can give it to you. And words that begin with AR, this is actually Germanic. This one comes straight from German. AR is usually, I like how visible this prefix is. Arise, abide, awake, ashamed. This is about emotion away. So this is like mapping out your language. When you talk about something with the A prefix in this situation, it means that you're moving something away from you. So arise, you're moving away from your bed. Awake, you're moving away from sleep. Abide, you're moving away from waiting or listening. And,
True.
So...
yeah, there's some, it's because, of course, in Latin you have ad, meaning toward, but you also have ab, ab, which usually means away. I think especially with, abide. What was the last one you said? What was after abide?
Abide, ashamed.
No. Okay, maybe I was thinking of abide.
Awake?
Yeah, it really feels like abide, you're leaving the waiting. The rest of them, you're definitely going towards the thing. Like awake, of course, you're waking up. Ashame, of course, you're going to shame. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And as a bonus, A also has another linguistic tradition in English. It refers to it's more like shortening this away situation or this of or on situation. It's just sort of reduced to an A. So you get twice a day. That's 2 times every day. You also get a hunting we will go, which is archaic at this point. It's obsolete. But it is something that, I at least was familiar with from preschool. Just a hunting we will go, a hunting we will go. Hi-ho, there we go, a hunting we will go. And that is meaning on. We're going to go on a hunting trip. We're going to go twice on a day. So, I got caught in a rabbit hole with the A prefix, sue me.
Yeah, I'm skeptical about that sense of like when we're using it for per each, like 2 times a week and so on. Like this argument that it's somehow not just the article like a and, Like we would say 2 times an hour. So clearly at some point, if it was at one point the prefix sort of then eventually we became mistaken and started to just treat it like it was a and the article instead,
So this might help a little bit with this sort of visualizing where these words come from and what direction. The phrase o'clock, it doesn't mean a clock, it means of the clock.
Right, but that's an O apostrophe, right? So we get that.
It is now of, but it's the same usage for that A. And that sort of linguistic blending when the sounds sound the same just sort of reinforces that internationally.
Fascinating. So you're saying that it used to be o'clock? 5 o'clock?
I don't think a clock was initiated during the period where that would have been like relevant, like a clock. This would have been after that because clocks weren't invented until 1600? Something like that.
Okay. I'm back to being skeptical of it again.
When were clocks invented? I know it was after Shakespeare. Anyway, just a little bit of apartheid history. In 1948, Prime Minister Daniel Francois Malan of South Africa decided that the races needed to be separated in some of the most profound ways. I'll start with some of the human rights abuses since the Nakba of Israel, because this would have been 1948. And believe me, I'll tie it in together. Israel, since 1948, has been accused by the Human Rights Watch of murder, killing POWs, collective punishment, sexual violence, targeting journalists, civilians, and protected objects, incitement to, and genocide. Also, targeting civilians indiscrimination of targets, human shields, starvation, torture, pillage, and violating medical neutrality, which is it just means, there's a standard in war that the medics, the people who take care of people's health, are off limits, and they will treat both combatants and insurgents. So that's like the standard medical, moral code. If you're a doctor or a nurse and you're at a battlefield, it does not matter who it is, it's your responsibility to treat them. So Israel has been accused of violating that. And I also want to note, every single one of these is a factor of apartheid. So
yeah, and then they even killed that chef this year, which is like, that's on a level where it's just like petty, it's like,
exactly,
you kill a chef? Like,
what did the chef do to you? And
such
more journalists
extreme
have been
level.
killed. Yeah, more journalists have been killed since October 7th than since the Korean War or something. So worldwide, it's just a lot of. And I was in high school journalism class, so I went to the Museum of Journalism in Washington, D.C. with my class. They have an entire floor just honoring journalists who lost their lives on the front line, or having been assassinated, or all of these horrible things. And I don't know. Whatever.
In other words, they could open another floor, or they will need to open another floor just for journalists who died in the Israel conflict.
I do think that that's a little bit more moral than to just like squeeze all the pictures and biographies together and to try to fit everybody on.
Yeah, it's just a little weird when like every other journalist you read about when you're walking around the room is like died in Israel.
Oh yeah, it's so wild to me, and the fact that our taxes are paying for this is just, it makes me sick. But
of course, I mean, this is the thing, right? It's like. And that's kind of, so I don't even know if we mentioned it, but kind of the reason we were talking about Dave Matthews on this episode is not just because he's from South Africa, but he's also very vocally against American funding of Israel, so like, it's like, obviously he's not Jewish, I'm not Jewish, we're Americans. Yeah, you're Jewish at least, so we have some street cred. But I mean, like, we're the ones, we're buying this, we're the ones paying the bill for it, and like, there's so much disregard for this very simple objection of just like, well, I mean, I don't like that I'm the one, facilitating this, really. I mean, it's like, I know there's lots of suffering in the world. I get it. It's like there's lots of problems, and obviously it's impossible to look at all of them, or maybe it isn't impossible. I don't know, but it's very challenging. But this is one that we're very vigorously supporting. We're very vigorously helping out. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There's no plausible deniability in it. We have our hands in, well, all the bullets, which technically, I mean, it really does make me feel sick about it. And not because I'm Jewish. I don't associate Israel with Judaism, because just a quick Jewish history lesson. We are not the children of kings. We are the kids of survivors. Like we are nomads. We have this nomadic history. A nation state, any kind of nation state, is antithetical to Judaism. So to put Israel as the Jewish state, it's just the least Jewish interpretation of the situation at all. Which is why you see that the Orthodox Jews hate it. Hate it! And I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about racism. The etymology, not the actual thing. Also, real quick, do you know what endogamy is?
No idea.
Well, that one's an easy Greek one. Gami being, of course, marriage, and endo referring to the native area. So endogamy means you're not allowed to marry anybody outside of your own race. You only marry within your culture. Which
didn't know there was a word
been
for that. Wow.
Enforced. Yeah. You have to have a name for it if you're going to demand that your people adhere to it.
Well, to be fair, I don't think most Americans knew the name for it, and we've been doing it for centuries,
Yeah, that's true. That is very, very true. So I do want to talk a little bit about the other big word regarding South Africa and Israel, which is racism. Racism comes from, it has a little bit of an ambiguous history. The most compelling arguments that I could find were the Arabic word ras and the Hebrew word rosh. Rosh being like, our New Year is called Rosh Hashanah. It's the New Year. I don't have as much familiarity with Arabic, but I assume that they're related. They're both Semitic languages, and Ras.
Yeah, how poetic, right? That it's like the two possible languages of origin are the two cultures that are kind of centered around this topic.
Yeah. So the Ras and the Rosh. mean the head, the beginning, or the origin. So, of course, we have Rosh Hashanah and Hebrew. That's really the only Hebrew I really know. So, that's where the word race comes from. Now, is race important to a human being's
But wait, let me
quality of
understand.
life, or-
So, in these supposed roots, you said Raj and the other one. Like, what did they mean in these
Raz and
origins?
Rosh. Oh, I did lose you on that. Raz and Rosh, Raz Arabic, Rosh Hebrew. It means head, beginning, or origin. Like how Rosh
in both
Hashanah-
languages.
Yes, in both languages, that's the meaning.
Fascinating.
Yeah, we don't give enough attention to how similar Arabic and Hebrew are. I feel like I know more about how Arabic intersects with Spanish than I do about Arabic and Hebrew, which is really a shame because this is like the first generation in. Oh, it's like the third generation in history, if you count Nakba, since the origins of Israel. It's the first time in history that people in Palestine, Jewish Palestinians and Muslim Palestinians, have been kept apart from each other. We actually have really, really close cultural roots, and it's a damn shame that we're being gaslit into thinking that Jews and Muslims never got along, because it's not true. It's not true. Both saw Jerusalem and the Palestinian area as a final destination, as a last stop. So of course they interacted. Of course they were neighbors. They were friends. They were married to each other at points. It's so unjust that has been more or less erased from both Jewish and Muslim history.
I had this vague impression that Hebrew had to be reconstructed whenever they decided to make it like the official language of a country. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of had to build it from similar languages.
Yeah. And in a little bit, we'll talk about that. I promise. Because it's like one of the most wild origins of a language that I've ever heard. So, in December 2023, South Africa first made its accusation against Israel for war crimes, specifically apartheid. And South Africa would know what apartheid looks like. The UN took that under advisement and has decided to investigate whether this could be prosecuted. And in March 24, the UN says that there is reasonable ground to believe that genocide is existing. It recommended It recommended arms embargoes on Israel, like nobody sends you any weapons, a demand for a ceasefire and transparency, and reparations due to the victims of the Nakba and the war in Gaza. And I hesitate to say war, because a war implies that both are at equal power, and it implies that more soldiers are dying than civilians, and that's just, it's not the case.
Yeah, it's fascinating from the standpoint of Americans who, our government is so hesitant to call anything a war ever. Everything's a conflict or some other such word.
Oh, you're right on that.
Whereas it's like in Israel, you see the opposite side of the coin where they're latching onto this word war, I think. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what they're saying firsthand. But, people in that orbit are just to kind of legitimize this what they would otherwise have to call something like genocide or something.
Yeah. And from personal experience, I have lost at least 4 family members just because we refuse to speak to each other. It makes me very sad that we've reached a place where the victimized of a genocide become the victimizers of another genocide. And it's really, really sad to see, that's the way that evolution is going. So in 1947, people in South Africa started enforcing separation of black South Africans and white South Africans. And this was... I've got some more notes on here, I believe. No. So this was the first of the separateness. And at first it started as basically separating white people from black people, because it has to start slowly or else you're going to risk a revolution.
In terms of like just neighborhood or something, like they couldn't be in the same location, basically?
Yes, they had separate black neighborhoods. White people could live wherever they want. These black neighborhoods, I do recommend listening to Trevor Noah's Born a Crime or reading it. It's a really fascinating look at what it was like to grow up in apartheid South Africa as a black man. For example, he was
for him particularly as a right, as half black parent and a white parent, right? So he was
Yes. And his father was, I believe, a Swiss guy who came over to South Africa for some work. His mother was a black woman. It's really, again, sad doesn't even cover it, but being born with the government ready to prosecute your existence, because endogamy was enforced. And so if any child was a little bit too light-skinned, they would be ridiculed. Sometimes their parents would be investigated. It was a really shit time. The black population was kept in basically ghettos. Trevor Noah indicated that you didn't build out on your home because you were given an allotment, a very small allotment, and you could build on it. You can't build it to be larger, so you just have to add room and room and room as you can afford it. Well, white people at that time had basic necessities met: running water, electricity, plumbing. The black areas were largely not able to get those resources for themselves. Education was stunted. All of the very popular, good paying jobs went to white people. And so black people were reduced to lower price. This is based on a Dutch, or rather an Afrikaans word called baaskap, which means a bosshood. And that's what gave South Africans the ability to dominate as a minority group, as white people. It was keeping everybody separate and lifting one group up as superior and pushing the other one down as inferior, as disgusting, as vile. That's the only way that this can work, is if you have people unable to speak to each other about and humanize each other and really actually see what's going on from the other's perspective. And this was, from 48 to 94, and I'm not doing that math because I'm bad at it. But needless to say, it was a very unacceptable way of living.
So, I don't know. It's just I think apartheid gets kind of singled out, which is fascinating. I guess because it's the most recent time it's happened, but obviously this repeats again and again and again. It's you see something very similar in Australia in history, where it's they were really not scientifically thought of as human, the indigenous people, for a long time. And then, of course, in America, we have a very similar situation in our history twice over, right? Because we did it to the indigenous peoples, and then we did it to the African people Japanese that we brought here as well. And then we kind of did again to the Chinese to some extent, after that. So it just keeps happening over and over, and it's it's one of these things where
people in camps.
We did that, that happened too, it's we always, I think we always get this feeling it's in history, it's always in history, and I think it's so shocking when it happens in our times, while at the same time kind of hard to recognize it sometimes. I think just because it's unpleasant to recognize it. And it's so much easier to deny it, and there's lots of people eager to help us deny it when it's happening, right?
Especially when you are, through no fault of your own, in the group that has power. it's really hard to get white people to see what white people have done to Native Americans, what white people have done to black people, what white people have done to Chinese people. Like, it's really difficult to see past the privilege sometimes. And I can respect that, but it is absolutely your responsibility as a functioning human to unlearn the stuff that hurts other people.
Yeah, and to really have this certain kind of self-doubt where you kind of question things that are comfortable for you to think and believe, and kind of question these like easy ideas, I also think it's pretty interesting just from a linguistic standpoint that, we have this word apartheid, which has essentially become a word in the English vernacular. I think it's kind of fading now, but if you came up in that time, especially in the 90s, where it was like coming to a head to stop it, all these protests against it. And, it's always interesting whenever we choose to translate a word and whenever we don't, because if we were to decide, okay, let's call it what it is in English, we would have to say something like segregation, which, again, kind of...
one of the political scientists I read about from the 1960s, he actually made a valid point that segregation has such a nasty flavor to English speakers that they had to replace it with apartheid. And now apartheid has such a nasty taste in your mouth that we're going to have to call it something new.
I can't wait to see what they come up with.
Yeah. And, it's done consciously, and it's done consciously to separate people. And just another perspective from a Jewish American. This is something that my rabbi very much told us. He gave us a lesson which was the worst of the 10 plagues for Passover. And obviously my answer was killing the firstborn, because I'm the oldest, but also because killing is literally the worst thing that you can do. And my rabbi said, no, the worst one was darkness, because when it's dark out, you can't see the other people around you to reach out and touch them and ask for help and all of that. I think that's why this separation ideal just hurts so much as a Jew, because it's obviously the worst one is still death of the firstborn, but darkness is also pretty bad because of that metaphor. And it's just really, really difficult for me to wrap my head around Jews that are pro-separateness, that are pro-apartheid. It's sad. It's really sad. That's the only word.
I didn't even know about the plague of darkness. Everybody's been sleeping on the plague of darkness. Wow. That's pretty epic.
Yeah. Darkness fell on Egypt. It's one of the last plagues. All right. I will see you over in the next segment, which is, of course, Eurovision.
Let's do it.
Do you like music? Do you like podcasts? Chances are you like music podcasts. Take this one for example, Pick a Disc, where every fortnight a guest comes on to talk about an album for whatever reason they want to. Sometimes I like it, sometimes perhaps even something else other than just like it. You just listen to the podcast and find out. We talk about the album, we talk about the songs, we talk about the artists, we talk about tangent things that are slightly related, and sometimes we deviate off tangents. But don't worry, we always bring it back in the end. But you can find us on all your social medias and all the podcast apps for searching for Pick a Disc. You can also find us on the part of the Wordy Podcast Network under linktree/Wordy Podcasts. And until then, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
So welcome back to the Eurovision segment of Getting Down and Wordy. And today, Russell, we are finally, and I say finally, I've been avoiding it more than anybody else. We are talking about Israel 2024.
Yeah, saved it maybe for last. No, we'll do one more for sure. Yeah. We don't have any 2025 stuff to tell y'all yet. Yeah, we were kind of waiting to see, just like with Joost Klein, we're kind of waiting to see if any other interesting news or controversies come out, or what's going on with the situation politically and all these things. But similar to Yost, nothing much more to report, I don't think. But you did the research, so you'll have to tell me.
Come out. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that has come out. It's just that nothing has resolved. So it is still a work in motion. There has been a lot done since Eurovision this year. And we'll talk about that.
Tell me more.
Mm-hmm. So, Eden Golan, her song from Israel was called Hurricane. It got first in the semifinal that she participated in, and in fifth in the final. Russell, do you remember what Hurricane used to be called before it was called Hurricane?
I think I still do. Yeah, it was October Rain. Is that right?
It was. Yeah, it was October Rain. So Eurovision has this tradition of being kind of apolitical. Like politics don't belong in art. This is art. We're all coming together. That is the entire stated purpose of this apolitical policy. And when October Rain was given back in February, it had very, very clear references to the October 7th massacre in Israel last year, which was awful. 1,400 people were killed by Hamas. A couple hundred were taken hostage. And then Israel lost their ever fucking shit. They just absolutely lost their mind in a way that put sort of into perspective our reaction to 9/11.
Yeah,
like the U.S. reaction to 9/11 was very much an overreaction. And don't get me wrong, it was a horrible, horrible attack. It did not deserve tens of thousands of civilian deaths. Just mathematically, the math doesn't math.
Yeah, and it's like, and I understand overreacting to that thing happening, even, to a tragedy like that happening. But it's like, you're part of a world community, and the rest of the world should not overreact with you. They should be trying to find, trying to ground everything, trying to find the rational in it,
The role of the rest of the world is mediation in this particular situation.
I mean, I know I've said it over and over again, but like this idea that Eurovision is supposed to be apolitical, they screwed that up themselves. It's like now Eurovision is the contest of no politics that we don't agree with. So then that creates quite a problem. You lost your moral high ground. It's like you can be political, you can even be aggressively anti this or that country political if it's in a way that we like.
Yeah. And the Khan, which is the Israeli, it's the Israeli television network that works with Eurovision. It means, what does it mean? I don't know. I don't care. So Khan, upon October Rain being rejected on the basis of politics, because it had references to Hamas fighters, the musical massacre, or the music festival massacre, and it had a very controversial lyric. I think it was something like, I don't want to quote it because I don't want to misquote it, but look up the lyrics to October Rain. It's very clearly a reference to October 7th.
Yeah.
So,
and to me, like the altering of it.
Yeah.
The I don't know. Are you about to talk about how it was altered? I don't want to jump ahead of you.
No, please jump ahead. I will talk about it.
Okay.
But
to me, the altering of it is almost the worst case scenario. It's almost like they get to have their cake and eat it too, because it's like people know what the song was about, and instead of forcing them to submit a new song, a different song or something, they simply get to have their song, and at the same time, it's like literally romanticized, right? It's like they've taken this song that was about this horrible tragedy and made it still sneakily about that, but also about like love and all these very palatable topics, so
Yeah.
I think again this perversion of political fairness that Eurovision is trying to have is really like born this kind of deformed monster of a thing that is really more horrible than if they had just made a straightforward choice in either direction and stuck to it.
And that was Khan's original statement was, we ain't changing nothing. We are going to reference the Reim Fest massacre. We're going to reference October 7th. And there is nothing you can do about it. At which point the president of Israel, that's right, they have a president and a prime minister. And the prime minister is the dickbag. So Khan decided early on, we're not changing anything. You can't infringe upon our art. This is about our pain. Why are you trying to silence us? And this was back in February. By March 7th, they had changed their minds like 3 different times, but they ended up in Israel changing it to Hurricane, which had most of the same lyrics, just lightly obscuring the direct references to to the October 7th massacre. And this led a lot of people to protest and be really mad about this for obvious reasons. It's not like they made any effort to make anything less political. It's almost like they weaponized anti-Semitism to weasel their way into Eurovision while engaging in a genocide. Which is so frustrating. You're not anti-Semitic if you object to genocide. I'm just giving all the listeners that are a little bit Jewish enough to have that internal guilt, but still do definitely believe in, anti-Zionism and the right of the Palestinians to exist.
It's different, but it's a similar tactic to the post 9/11 support our troops mantra. It's like, if you disagree, then you're somehow anti this group. So it's like it's a very effective way to shut down dissent, of course.
Yes, and if anybody tries to shut down your dissent, just tell them there's nothing less Jewish than committing a genocide. There just isn't. So they ended up going with October Rain, and they decided to join Eurovision instead of boycotting it. So, in response, several countries called for the exclusion of Israel, including Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, and Slovenia. They all signed this letter saying, hey, we don't want these people participating. Just putting that on the record. When that didn't move the needle anywhere, there was an artist letter of protest that several of the Eurovision artists said, and they didn't reference Gaza entirely. They didn't reference the genocide. They did say if Russia is not allowed in the competition, since 2022, when they invaded Ukraine, there's no justification to allow Israel in if Russia's not allowed. They're both committing war crimes. They're both aggressors in their respective conflicts. And they're basically equivalent on several levels. Dictator. And so the people that signed the letter were Bambi Thug, Gate from, I think that's Norway, Yolanda from Portugal, Megara, Musti, Nemo, Ollie Alexander, Saba, Sylvester Belt, Windows 95 Man, and Eric Sada, who won Eurovision last year for Sweden. He himself has Palestinian heritage, so when he performed during the semifinal, he wore a keffiyeh wrapped around his wrist as a bracelet. And immediately following that, Eurovision and the EBU said, all right, no keffiyehs, no Palestinian flags. You will be removed if you present the flag other than the gay rainbow flag and a flag of a country that is participating. So they moved that target around to try to appease Israel, which caused a lot of backlash and a lot of rebellion. Like Yolanda, we talked about it. She wore keffiyeh printed acrylic nails for her final performance. And because she wore the keffiyeh nails in her final performance, this is kind of interesting, sad, is the EBU, rather than releasing her final performance to the YouTube channel, instead released her semi-final performance, which only had like basic bare acrylic nails. And everybody was real pissed about that as well.
Yeah. It's like here you are making Palestinianness against the rules. You know, it's like you're taking it to a level. Again, it's very similar to apartheid. This idea that you can be literally illegal just as your existence is something that's illegal. I think at this point, the genocide's still happening, and I don't know. Hopefully, it will stop. But I think that the Eurovision 2025, I forgot what year it is. 2025.
So you looked at your watch.
Performers. Yeah, there's no year on this. I don't know what I thought I would find here, but I was really grasping for air. They have a whole year to come up with like really, really creative ways to subtly reference Palestine, and so I really hope they don't let us down. Yeah. Eurovision actually did release their findings on the independent research on this whole year. It has been a debacle. We talked about it a little bit last week, but half an hour before the airing of the final, there were still 6 countries that were threatening to walk away because of what happened with Yoast. So we got into it last week, so I'm not going to spend too much time. It'll be like a few weeks ago now. Remember, this episode's come out of order.
Yes, you are right. So back around Thanksgiving, we talked a little bit about this incident that led to the disqualification of Yoast. So I won't spend too much on Eden other than she released some sort of Instagram video a couple weeks ago of a picture of her wig, a blonde wig that she used to go around. So Israel stopped her from interacting with people outside of Eurovision, said that she had to stay in her room most of the time because of the terror threat. And she was getting a little bit cabin fever, getting a little bit of cabin fever. And she put on a blonde wig as a joke and said, I'm going to go out like this. And she released it a couple of weeks ago saying, I didn't know when I was taking this photo that I was actually taking a picture of the thing that saved my life. And she was never attacked. Nobody recognized her. Nobody threatened her. And it's just this persecution complex that a lot of Israelis have.
Is she saying that, hypothetically, if she had stayed in her room, an assassin could have more easily found her? Is that her logic here?
No, her logic here is that if she decides to go out and people recognize her as Eden Golan from Israel, then she'll be subject to attack. So
they'll just tear her apart.
Yeah.
Like a bag of wolves. I wanted to say. I really thought the wig thing was just this Jewish Orthodox wig wearing.
Yeah, but she's not
you have
Orthodox.
To wear a wig thing. Okay, yeah. I don't know who does and doesn't wear the extra wig.
Orthodox Jews, men and women, have to have their head covered in public. Mm-hmm. Men usually wear hats. Women usually wear wigs or scarves around their hair. And of course, that's where also the yarmulke comes from. You're supposed to be humbled before God, so never show your scalp, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know.
God doesn't want to see it
either. Yeah.
I just love this idea of having double hair. That's my favorite.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Hebrew language in general. And you alluded a little bit to this. Hebrew has an interesting history. And I'm going to compare it just for like clarification. I'm going to compare it to Yiddish, which is also what is considered a Jewish language. So Yiddish comes from several Germanic languages: German, Hebrew, Aramaic, Slavic, and Romantic roots. It was invented about 800 years ago. It's meant to be a diasporic language. So it's sort of like cobbled together from disenfranchised Jews from all over the place, just so that Jews can have a way to communicate with each other until then. Communicate with each other. And Hebrew is a purely Semitic language. Fair. Yiddish was created about 800 years ago. Hebrew goes back about 3,000 years. Usually, when languages are 3,000 years ago old, nobody speaks them anymore, at least not in a way that is recognizable. Hebrew found itself revitalized in the late 1800s by Rabbi Eliezer ben Yehuda. So Eliezer ben Yehuda had this idea that if Hebrew was ever to come back as a spoken language, then there had to be a Jewish state. But there can't be a Jewish state without Hebrew being a spoken language. So he had this idea that he was going to create the first natural Hebrew speaker, the first person whose Hebrew is their first language. How did he do this? By having a son.
Of course. It's a fascinating idea that you like need a country to have a language. I think that's probably true. It's I mean, I'm not saying like if you're in a diaspora, if you're like scattered across, I'm not saying you can retain a language, but if you want to like birth a language, if you want a language that was not being spoken at that point to start, I suspect he's probably right. I mean, you at least need a community, I think.
Yeah.
You know, as far as the adverse, I don't know if you necessarily need a language to have a country. I don't think that's really true. I think lots of countries share a language, you know?
Yeah. So this sort of speaks a little bit to, and I know I'm sounding like I'm dissing a lot on Jews. I'm dissing a lot on, unethical practices. Because to raise your son in a way that, at this point, Hebrew has not been spoken for about 1,000 years. It's like Latin. You have your Latin church stuff, but that's the only time that you ever speak Latin. And that was true of the Torah, is you only ever spoke Hebrew when you were reading the Torah. So there's no conversational Hebrew. It's not an evolving language. It's like a dead language that sometimes gets brought out like a puppet. The zombie, I call it the zombie language, honestly.
Zombie puppet. It's interesting combo.
Yeah. So Eliezer ben Yehuda had a son named Ben Zion. He had moved with his wife to the land of Israel with this idea of creating the first Jew in Israel. So Eliezer said to his wife, "You are not allowed to speak any language but Hebrew," which in a country or an area that nobody speaks Hebrew is very isolating and lonely. So his wife Devorah...
I hope she knew Hebrew, at least.
She learned on their way to Israel, and she only picked up phrases
okay, she's got it.
Piece by piece, yeah.
She's good to go.
Yeah, but of course none of her neighbors, even though they wanted to be friends with her, could communicate with her, because even though she spoke their language, she wasn't allowed to.
Wow, that's discipline on her part, or fear. I mean, it's tough, right? Because as you said, there's lots of things in the modern world, or even that existed in the old world too, but were not mentioned in the Torah, that there probably just was no word, literally no word for it all, Yeah. I mean, obvious things like car and airplane, but I'm sure there's lots of things that just like, there's no occasion to say it in the Bible. Like, I have a strong feeling they never said like vagina, never talked about it in any way in the Bible. So like, what do you say?
They talk about penises a lot, but yeah, nothing. They don't really talk about. The Old Testament is filled.
Maybe they do.
He was hung
They'll
like a donkey, or
yeah.
So that's it's strange. So it's very difficult to start from that area and build up a national language unless you have your first kid who speaks Hebrew. Now, Ben Zion, which means the son of Israel, is Eliezer's son's name. He actually did not speak until he was 4. Because he only spoke to his parents, they forbade him from speaking to anybody in anything but Hebrew. So they sort of isolated him from having any friends. He did have, I believe, a pet dog that he was very, very, very fond of. But when that dog...
And the dog spoke what?
Woof woof.
Oh, shoot. So not Hebrew either.
No. But I should look up the Hebrew word for that onomatopoeia, because I know that different languages have really interesting onomatopoeias for animal noises. So not just his neighbors, but Jews in general detested Eliezer. They thought that it was a complete abandonment of what Hebrew was meant for. So a Hebrew person and in Jewish culture, Hebrew is spoken to talk about the Torah or to talk about religious things. Aramaic was spoken whenever you're learning something. And there's another one that was just for, like, existing and whatever. But there were 3 separate languages. Speaking Hebrew for all 3 of them was verboten. You're not supposed to do that.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
And so Aramaic was a language
Orthodox Jews considered...
Aramaic was a language that Jewish people were speaking quite far back in history.
Oh, yeah,
in tangent with Hebrew. Fascinating.
Oh, yeah, extremely in history. And now nobody knows Aramaic because Hebrew is used for everything. Which, good stuff, bad stuff. But it does lead me to something that I had to talk to my boss about. Because Hebrew has this kind of... So you'll hear Israelis speak, and a lot of them don't pronounce things the same way. Like, when Yvette found out I was Jewish, she asked me, how do you say thank you in Hebrew? And I said, I don't know, because I don't speak Hebrew. And she said that when she went to Jerusalem, she's Chaldean, so it's part of that, like, last stop thing. Everybody's got to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. She said, why does everybody pronounce thank you differently? And thank you is pronounced toda, or toda, or tada. It means thank you, or toda rabbah means thank you a lot. And she didn't understand why nobody pronounced it the same way. And I had to tell her that's because there's no such thing as a native Hebrew speaker. Because this was resurrected. It's no longer a native language. It's no longer a cultural language. It's more of a state language, which I think I agree with the Orthodox Jews on this one. That is a perversion of religion. It just is.
Yeah, I mean, as an American, I feel very comfortable in saying, like, a religious state is abhorrent. You know, I mean, I think it's culturally insensitive to say something like that, of course. But, you know, for me, living here in America, like, the idea of a state with a state religion or even just a generally, like, enthusiastic religious character sucks. You know, I don't want it. I'm good.
Going, like, one final point on this, just a little capstone. So, sorry, give me a second to rewire my skull because everything fell out of it again. So, Israel is currently murdering, I think at this point we're going to be up to like 39,000 civilians. This is obviously unacceptable, but also unacceptable from a Jewish perspective, even if you're looking for the protection of Israel, which I know some Zionists are. You see, the problem is we're looking at Hanukkah right now, and I'm going to tell you the story of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a festival.
I'm currently, listeners, I'm like sitting down on the floor on the rug and crossing my legs.
I have latkes to share to make the experience more enjoyable.
She's lying, listeners. She doesn't have any latkes.
Shh, gosh. So the story of Hanukkah begins around 2,500 years ago, thereabouts, when the Greeks invaded Judea, which roughly about the Arabian Peninsula and north of the north of Egypt. So they got invaded by Greeks, and the Maccabees were a set of brothers from a very prominent and well-respected member of the Jews, the Hebrews at the time.
The Maccabees?
The Maccabees!
It sounds like a grocery store in, like, Ohio.
Maccabees, that's actually Hebrew for the hammer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. My favorite Hanukkah movie is The Hebrew Hammer.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. So these Maccabees were forced into exile, forced into an enclave, basically. And they decided, fuck that. We don't want to be Greek. We're Jewish. Like, we want our own homes. So what they did is they waged a war from the mountains. They attacked the Greeks, and it was such a small number of Hebrews, such a small number of Maccabees, and such a large Greek army that, I mean, there was no possibility that they would win. But, of course, they used guerrilla tactics. So they eventually won the conflict through using surprise tactics, what we might today call terrorism. And through that, after they expel the Greeks, they go to rededicate the temple in Jerusalem, and that requires lighting candles. So they only had enough oil to light this lamp for one night, but somehow, miraculously, that light lasted for 8 days. And that's why we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days. That's why it's the Festival of Light. Now, Russell, did any part of that story sound familiar?
Yeah, bits and pieces, like maybe 90 to 95%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the sense of like having to try to resist to fight for some like right to have a home there and right to be yourself and these kind of things. I mean, like, I think something as a representative American, as we both are, but like, I remember being in high school, and I think the Palestinian-Israel conflict kind of rises up often, where suddenly it's in the news again, suddenly we decide to pay attention again. And I think everyone was pretty confused about, okay, where is Palestine exactly? And like, I think we often have this feeling, this assumption that like Palestine is a country that's here, right next to it, bordering it is Israel, which is a country that's here, and they're just always like fighting each other for some reason, but like, it's not really like that. I mean, the reason why it's compared to apartheid so much is like, the Arabs, whether they're in the part we think of as Palestine or not, they're just kind of like living there. And they're also kind of the larger, more populous group,
Absolutely.
And so in exactly the same way, it's like this smaller group of the privileged race of people get to be a country. In Palestine, I remember distinctly hearing that from my Jewish history teacher in high school. She was saying, Palestine's not even a country. You can't even point to it on a map. Which, I wonder why that is.
Honestly.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, like, now we're seeing, okay, this very clear and obvious aggression from Israel, which, I wonder who empowered them to do that. Well, honestly, many people, but even before that, is this matter of the quote unquote borders of Israel being kind of moved and more territory taken from, people of where that was their home,
Oh, yeah.
So,
and 2023, just after October, represented the largest, up until now, so from October to now, has been the largest land grab by Israeli settlers of the West Bank. So since October 7th...
Taking their opportunity.
Oh, yeah. It's completely a land grab. And I remember the first time I realized that Zionism might be not right. Because as a Jew and as an American, I, of course, was raised in Zionism, thinking that that's the default. And I was radicalized by 9/11. I think that represents a lot of our generation. So it wasn't until college that I met my first Zionist person, anti-Zionist person. My professor of French history, who, amazing that an African man who grew up in French culture has an issue with colonizing, with colonialism. I remember the first time I figured out that Zionism might not be the best option. And it was so jarring to me to have that sort of realization. It made me question all of the things I grew up learning. Like, is America actually the best? Is, democracy working?
Have you figured out which country is the best, by the way? Have you cracked it? Figured it out?
Norway.
Yeah, that's a popular one. Yeah. I don't know if I have a choice. I brought it up. I don't know what I'd even say in a jokey manner, actually. not a huge fan of any particular one. And I mean, I think people like the protesters at the colleges, Gen Z, TikTok, all these people are getting really raked over the coals for having some kind of support for Palestine, and the kind of conflation that people make is like, well, you know what they do to women, or you know what Palestinians do to gay people, and so on. It's like, okay, that's fine. You can have that political interpretation, but even if you think like these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, it still doesn't justify the good guys committing war crimes.
No.
Then they're not the good guys anymore.
No, this is like the Avengers. This is why everybody loved the Avengers, because the Avengers can destroy entire cities, and they're still the heroes.
Well, all the cities are CGI, so nothing happens. It's right back in the next movie, amazingly. I think the Avengers might take place in the Matrix, actually, now that I think of it. Fan theory.
That's actually, you know what? That has a lot of legs to it. I'm interested in learning more about that. So that is Israel. That is October rain / hurricane. That is Eurovision. What are your impressions of Israel as a country, Israeli as a or Hebrew as a language? Is there any final thoughts that you have that you'd like to sort of address on this very, very important issue?
Well, as if I could say anything without getting myself canceled. But I mean, I think all countries have a dark history. It's like, in the end, you just have to say, okay, we're here now. This is the countries we have now. But I mean, I think for the most part, we're trying very hard to just, let the countries be the countries and try to move forward and progress and these things. So a lot of people, I think they take this logical leap that being anti-Zionist or whatever you want to call it, which, for me as a non-Jewish American person with no connection to any of these cultures, I have no sense of Zionism. And I don't think it's fair to make me learn about what is Zionism just for me to have an opinion, Don't
try to teach me anything.
It's not relevant to me, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that
it shouldn't be. The sentence should end with you shouldn't kill 39,000 children or 39,000 civilians. Half of which,
and
by
I
the
think
way, are
it's
children.
fine to just say, I don't want this military aggression to be happening. And, we can very clearly see that at this point, it's Netanyahu has intentionally avoided a ceasefire just so he can continue to do the land grab, continue to do the, wiping out of Palestine that of course he's always wanted. And so I don't know. It's like people who think they're supporting Israel, I think they're just misguided in what they believe Israel wants or is, or what will help it,
And a lot of that is because there's not a whole lot of Jewish awareness. Like the stories that I just shared about Hanukkah, like I grew up with those. And the 10 plagues, like we memorized the 10 plagues in Torah school. Like I have a lot more awareness of Jewish culture here, and that makes sense. I shouldn't have to. I think that having an opinion that genocide is bad, I think that transcends, like, Zionism, anti-Zionism. It's just don't kill civilians. That's a war crime. So, all right.
Yeah.
I think we just solved the world.
Perhaps the most political episode ever. I don't know if we'll ever top ourselves on that.
Oh, I'll try.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to talk about in the world.
But again, this is something that should be transcending politics. Like, this is literal war crimes. This is crimes against humanity. This is truly an awful thing. It's an awful thing to witness. It must be horrific to live through. It must be so terrifying. So
yeah, but I mean, what is politics if not just the science of like oppression and grinding people into dust?
Yeah,
don't you think?
Yeah, basically, that's it's a pretty apt description. I'd be interested to look at the etymology of politics and just see how violent they are.
Well, I mean, it very clearly comes from the same root as polite, which is pretty hilarious.
Really?
Really, of course. I mean, I can say that with confidence without even looking it up. Anyways, that's it, I guess, listeners. Hope you had a rip-roaring good time with that one. We'll see you again in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening. Let us know
if you want any more apartheid jokes.
True, yeah. Thanks very much to Patsy Walker for our theme song, Who's Wordy Now. Check out some other great podcasts at podmoth.network. You can find that link in the show description. Find us at Getting Down and Wordy on Instagram or TikTok, and you can email us if you like at gettingdownandwordy@gmail.com. I guess if you want to be angry at us in an email, that's probably fine. You can do it. I just check that email so rarely that I probably won't notice that you sent it.
I literally don't care about getting canceled. Cancel me over this. I dare you.
Yeah, that's fine. You can cancel us. We can take it, I guess. I mean, our fall will not exactly be meteoric. We'll fall like 1.5 feet to rock bottom.
So this is what rock bottom looks like. Have a great Hanukkah and stop killing children.
Happy Hanukkah.